that's one of the issues we have at this level.
Yeah.
And as players go through squirt, Pee-wee, Bantam,
Right.
are they on the ice with comparable players?
Right. That's a fact for sure. I don't really know how to get over that little hurdle.
Go
I
ahead.
can only speak on like cloquet hockey. Like typically, what I'm seeing with our youth is we're putting our less skilled guys on the back end and our more skilled guys on the front end, just for our program.
Yeah.
That's what we see. So you don't have confident puck handlers on the back end anyway, or
Right.
confident passers. So by the time they're getting to high school, you're saying head man puck, they're not that good at doing that yet.
Right.
They're not being developed or whatever for whatever reason. And what I'm trying to do is like encourage our coaches at a younger age. Like we should start working from the back forward, get confident, good puck handling, skilled developed
Yep.
players on the back end so they can actually do stuff like this.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I can only speak for, and what I've seen is like the teams that look at Rapids last year, very confident defenseman, second round draft pick. He dictated the whole pace of the game because he was a confident player,
Right.
good passer, and he did all those things. I don't know. I think a mindset needs to be changed.
Yeah.
At least where I'm at.
Yeah, I think a big part of that, like I think is just, it still goes back to like my first thought should be move the puck.
Yeah.
I don't care what your talent level is. Like it's a little bit harder when you're the best player by far, and you want to get out of the zone, and you've been in there for a while, right? And if you give it to that guy, it might not get out. That's a little touchy one, right? That's where the coach just whispers, like I want you to just carry that one up this time, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I think even with the lesser players, their first thought, even probably more, should be like, then work on the skills for sure, the stick handling, puck handling, do all that stuff in practice, or make sure they go on the outdoor rinks and they're practicing all that stuff in the summer or whatever. But I think within the team, the concept has to be give the puck up. First guy you see as a defenseman, give it to him, and then if you can help, help. I don't care how good you are, I think that still should be your mindset. I think that's just the way to play hockey. That's a strong belief of mine, I guess. He's first.
I'm working in Northfield, and we're trying to put our best players in D, playing more, they're getting pucks out of the zone, and we're trying to hide guys if we need to play. And I was just thinking, it might be better, kind of put comparable guys and look for chemistry between line mates, and that's valuable.
Yeah.
You don't usually think about chemistry between one side and D in the wing, or
Yeah.
the other side of the wing. Get them working together on a regular basis, so they have some sort of camaraderie.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right. Right.
I just never even considered that word.
Right. Yeah. At some point, like you're saying, is maybe it's not about creating offense all the time, but maybe it's just about creating that concept of let's move the puck to the next guy. And I think within all that and all those little plays, you do create offense because you have better synergy, maybe.
So I had a conversation last summer with Justin Paul, and you guys are probably heard of Justin. Basically, his whole life he's played forward and D at every level. And you ask him, he's like, I just move pucks north, I gap up, I skate. And I said, well, what really helped you in the long run, like when you were younger? He goes, I just know where everybody's supposed to be on the ice. So when I played forward and D and I went to the U too, he played some wing. He just has a better secondary read on everything.
Yeah.
And he said, but that started when he was actually a Pee-wee. He was playing both. And you look at like high-end soccer on their development model, they make kids play either mid and D or striker and mid. They make you do both a small percentage of the time. And I know that's a big topic of youth hockey because everybody wants to win and solidify their lines and get their hierarchy of who gets theirs and win. But there's something said about long-term secondary reads, knowing at least two positions, where to be on the ice.
Yeah, for sure. Like to that point, like a winger's gonna be a better winger if he knows what D's going through. If he played D for a couple weeks or whatever, like he's gonna maybe put himself in a better spot for that D next time. He's like, oh, I was having a hard time breaking it out because that guy was never where. If they think that way, they can learn a lot, right? Yeah.
To piggyback off Goldie is a perfect lead-in. Joey Pierce came to us as a D, as an elite Bantam defenseman, and he was rammy as hell. Like, always up, always up, always up. And we had him play forward as a sophomore. I think it was the best thing for his game. But then, to my second point I want to bring up, I think we have to change our mindset too, and like a paradigm shift of like what we evaluate, like you're getting at. Because I had so many coaches come up to me, and even scouts last year, and be like, Joey's having a tough year this year, huh? Because he only had 5 goals last year. Well, he was hurt. But I would argue that Joey was a way better defenseman last year than he was even as a junior because he moved the puck. He had like 14 assists last year, but only had 5 goals. So then people are like, "Was something wrong with Joey?" No, nothing's wrong with Joey. Joey's learned how to play the game better. I would argue. I mean, you've watched him. You guys are taking him, so I mean, you've watched his game evolve.
Yeah.
I think he's just turned into a much better defenseman.
Right. And I think that's what happens in
overall.
some of these, like the player up there, like he's able to do that when he's playing band, right? I'll see these bunch of guys that are like really good. Like the only way to hear him survive is really to move the puck. And some guys get forced into it. And the other little key thing is what I've seen just because of the youth hockey with my kids is I think if a kid doesn't do it early, they get to a point where all of a sudden they have to, and now even though they want to, they have a hard time. Just the logistics of making the pass, of the timing, the pace you need to put on it, where you need to put it, right? Like, I think that's all practice and it has to be done in a game or on the outdoor rink or whatever. But I've seen more kids that in the last 10 years that didn't pass early because they just were a little bit selfish or whatever reason they thought they were the guy. And all of a sudden in the high school level, they're like, holy cow, I can't do it by myself. And now I'm trying to make a play to a guy, but now it's in his feet. Now I put it over here because I haven't learned that little task of where to leave the puck or how hard to put it. All of a sudden passes 100 miles an hour every time. So there's so much synergy in all this stuff. So that's why it's such a great answer.
Like, you think about, sometimes you get forced to move a guy to a D, from forward to D, out of necessity. Injuries, you lose 2 or 3 guys in a week, and your 3rd or 4th center is just better than your extra defense. But you do it by necessity. Sometimes we got coaches just kind of get out of our comfort zone and look into it a little bit deeper and maybe think about it. All right, maybe this kid long term would be better as a defenseman anyways. We just got to make a change at Bantams or that sophomore year in high school. And you see it all the time with guys. I mean, I wasn't part of it, but Brian Burke told me there was major pushback when he moved Keandre back to D. And now we're all laughing about it.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
It worked out for him.
It wasn't in his DNA to hunt
Right.
on the forecheck. It wasn't in his DNA to finish
Yeah.
plays, but it certainly looks like the right call now.
Right.
When he was 15, there was major pushback.
Yeah. And sometimes the kids don't want to do it, right? Sometimes they don't want to do it. And I think it's hard to make a kid do something he doesn't want to do, right? I think Aaron Pion's kind of a good example. He played high school hockey all the way through as a forward, and now this year he's playing D as a wilderness, and he's like, it's like, holy shnikes, this guy's good. So he's learned a lot of skills as a forward. Now he's learning how to defend a little bit better. You know, I don't know where it's going to go for him, but like it's kind of it's cool to see a kid that can also step into a spot and go, holy cow, this maybe was your spot the whole time, right? For whatever their skill set is. Maybe they learn how to be as a forward, move the puck, and maybe that becomes a better defenseman later if you have some defensive tendencies. I still think defenders have to defend. Defensemen have to at least. I think this is what we fight sometimes, especially younger guys all the way through, is like, first you are a defender. You are a defenseman first, right? You're not a forward. Some want to just play offense all the time, which doesn't, you know, if they get 10 points in a year but they give up 45 doing it, are you really a defenseman? Right? It's just not worth it. I think we fight some of that with high school. I see that in high school quite a bit, right? And they're like, the dad or the parents will be like, well, you can't just make a play D. He's got to work on his offense. Well, that's what this is, right? What is that? What is offense? It's really about creating a goal for your team. How you do that, kind of, everybody's got a different dynamic a little bit, but you probably all have a player on your team that's like, could we get him to move the puck a little bit better? At least make him think, right? Give it up first, then follow, join the rush. Any thoughts? I like your thoughts. I like this conversation.
I think at the end of the day, we got to ask ourselves, what are we here for? Are we here to win games? Are we here to hang banners? Or are we here to develop hockey players?
Yeah.
And I think the message coming from the high school coaches down to the youth hockey organizations is their job should be to develop hockey players. Should be all about player development, helping every kid become a better hockey player. And that will allow that player to play the game longer. If we stick a kid in one position and say that's what you are for the rest of your career, we're not necessarily developing that player.
Yeah, 100%.
And I see it a lot at the youth level where you'll put a guy, make a guy play a certain position because that's what your team needs for that season, so you get stuck there. But if we're really here to develop players, we need to look at each kid individually
Because I mean, we have a lot of pride in our teams, and there's a part of it that needs to be about winning. You know, we can't take all the competitiveness out of competition, right? So it has to be a little bit of a give and take, I think. I mean, we all have our own opinions, and my opinion is no stronger than anybody else's.
And you can
already
do both.
Huh?
Right?
Yeah.
To me, it's
you
not
can find a
one
way to
or
do
the other.
both, right? I think that's
You can do both at the same time.
100%. I think at the end of the day, like if you're doing these things, I think you get a better player at the end. You probably get a better team, but I think it's not just a player concept, it's a team concept. You're doing the same thing for everybody in a lot of ways. I think when teams learn to play unselfishly and together, they might not get it at first, but I think incrementally they'll get better, and I think by the end of the year, your team is a lot better, right? It's no different than putting yourself to a challenge at some point. At some point, that challenge, you might get your ass kicked a few times, but at some point, you've moved around a little bit, right?
You use that example of Fish or Aaron Pionk. Like, Aaron Pionk last year took almost as many line rushes as a D as he did as a forward, but he never played D for us. He was our number one center, but he ran the power play as a D, and he always jumped into the D line in drills. And then we do so much work down low. Like, your center's a D, so he has all that skill set. And Scott had talked to his dad about maybe moving him to D, and if we just couldn't afford to move him to D. Like, he was our number one center, and he's phenomenal at it, but he doesn't have a natural scoring touch. So like, he's always played some D, and he played
That
D
probably line is probably great a little bit, right? The difference between a center and an offensive defenseman. It's almost the same player. Like when I played, I was a center, but I always thought of myself as like a third defenseman. Like I was the guy that had to help break the puck out all the time and defend all the time. I had the same role as a defenseman a lot of times. Just I had the freedom to go the other way more. But I think more than ever, like that center position is a little bit like that offensive defenseman, maybe. Similar skill set, similar mentality. So,
Do you think it's easier for a guy to go from forward to D or from D to forward?
depends on what you want out of that guy, honestly.
Yeah.
I think like I had this conversation with my dad yesterday because I was talking about this a little bit. Do you guys end up at D at some point because they're not offensively gifted? Like it's hard to take a guy that's a really good scorer and not put him at forward because there's not enough guys that can score and make those kind of plays. But if you're a guy that can get to that spot all the time, and I'd put Fish in that category. Fish is not Aaron. He's not a great scorer. Like he gets around and he gets great chances, but they just don't. I don't know. We all have a guy. Like why don't they go in? I don't know. He went to the back door. He shot it at the top shelf, but the goalie just seems to always make the save. Right? Is that how we end up with defensemen sometimes? Because they weren't the best offensive player? I don't know which way is easier. Like if you're looking for a guy that was kind of a ramrod as a defenseman, and maybe he is a better forward. He can just go create by hitting people and being on the rush, and just getting fast and getting in there and getting after it, right?
I think one thing that's so surprising with high school kids is how little they understand about each position. When you do ask them to make a switch, like the basic skills and system things that you would think that they would know just aren't there. So that the point of having those kids play multiple positions in youth, it would be so helpful for them going forward when they have more flexibility in the game.
For sure.
You know, like you were saying, there is a time and a place for a guy to, take the puck and start wheeling around.
That's our kid. No
You
shit.
guys spoke to guys that
Who's a
want to move a little bit more laterally.
Yeah.
Kevin's making it work. He was hesitant.
As a defense,
He was hesitant.
you got your momentum.
There's some
going,
kids that
you
can't
can
even
work
sing
around.
the
If you keep it speed still close enough to red line, you're probably going to be more inclined not to talk to that guy, but everyone says north to south, so the south part of it.
Yeah.
More laterally when that line comes, you got a D-man that does like to rush the puck.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially like you're talking like the forwards into the offensive zone, you're talking the D on the goal line.
Neutral zone, a lot of guys run a swing, but, when it comes to breaking the puck out, a lot of
Yeah.
times there's a wing to center, and you're going north to south, whatever.
I think the levels have changed, right? Like for us at Duluth, we need probably more support just because it's more tactically, right? So we need more close support. Or I'm a big believer at the lower levels to just like kind of keep that guy wide, kind of spread it out, and then I just go under the assumption like if someone comes to my lane, maybe you just switch it them, right? I don't need everybody running around all over, but 3 lanes, guy comes to my lane, maybe I get to his lane. You kind of keep that. I think that can create some movement. But yeah, you got to jump the holes. And I think that's what I've noticed with really good players. Is it's fun in the summer sometimes when I watch some of these Blades teams and whatnot. Like when you get the really good players together, even at a young age, these kids start when they start trusting each other, their game just goes like this because they just start jumping these holes, and you're like, wow. Like you get peewees that look like they're pros at some point because they got 4 or 5 of them together. All of a sudden they start jumping holes, and so I think their ability to grasp stuff is kind of there. It's just sometimes we're not in the place where they get to see it enough to like understand it. I don't know if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Longtime fan of Derek, first time caller. I have many things to say about this, but I'll minimize it for the betterment of all of us. You touched on it immediately. Like it's a YouTube generation, it's an Instagram generation. The kids see the highlight reel goal, they see that end-to-end run, and I'm not pinning the blame on you, but you are the reason that I made right-handed shot and now can shoot left-handed with right instead because I saw you do it in college. And I was like, holy shit, that was amazing. So the first thing I did was the next practice, I was like, I'm shooting left-handed with right instead because I want to be able to do this. So not ambidextrous, but I learned a new trait because I saw something that somebody did that I was enamored of.
Yeah.
And so these kids see that, and I had the great privilege of playing with kids like Mike Crowley, and as a squirt, his defensive partner, I had to be a stay-at-home guy because this kid was amazing. He was fascinating. He was the best skater in the state at that level, at that age, back in the 90s, sort of young and dropping. And so I had to stay at home, but all the attention was just on him. It was just on him. It was just on him. And here I am, just sitting here, plus. That's great.
Right.
But he's getting all the attention, all the stars are over him, and that eats at some of the kids. I'm sure it does. So they think that they have to do more. And so now, looking at it from an elder perspective, I try and teach the kids. It's the difference between a good defenseman and a great defenseman is not that ability to do the right to left hand shot. It's knowing when and when not to do that.
Yeah.
It's not that they can go end to end like Neil Thomas, one of the smartest fan of hockey players I've witnessed come on in Minnesota. He's phenomenal. But he knows when and when not to do that. He doesn't do that all the time.
No.
Justin Hall, he was the same way. It's knowing when and when not to.
Yeah, Prudence is a great example, right? He probably could go end every time. He knows exactly when to do it, when not to do it. Absolutely. I think we're fighting that. And it goes to last night. How many guys saw the goal between the legs or behind the back?
Yeah.
That's awesome. But it's funny because we came in after the game and Bill Watson, who was a Hobie Baker winner, is like, if that was my day, I would have chopped his arms off. Right? But that's where the game's changed. Like, I don't think we need to fight that. That's awesome. That was an awesome goal, even though it was on our guy. The guy said to our goalie, I go, that's really my fault because I didn't practice that on you in practice. Right? But I don't know what you do. Like, a guy has that in the mindset of be able to catch that, do that, go behind my back, and then put it top shelf on a 6'5" goalie. Kudos, right? I mean, that's what we're playing the game for. We get an opportunity to see stuff like that. So I don't want to take that away from kids. Like that's the fun part about hockey. Be so creative. You can have so much fun. Like it's the one sport where it's fun to go practice. Like how many sports aren't fun to practice? I don't know how much fun it is to practice football. I love football, but I don't know how much fun it is. Like hockey's fun. Like our outdoor rinks are full every night in Hermantown. It's not because we're making them do it; they just love it. So we don't want to take the fun out of it. I just think that when we're in a season, I think that's the time to learn like the team concept stuff. A lot of times, because I don't know if they're going to get it otherwise. And that's not telling them they can't go end to end and make, but let's do it at the right time, right? Yeah.
So with the Rona and people not seeing live hockey, context is more important than it's ever been. So people need to watch live games, to watch any player throughout the shift, what they're doing away from the puck, that kind of stuff. Because they're getting technically more and more skilled. They're watching YouTube videos, they're going to personal trainers. They're developing technical skills, but it's the context. It's when and where.
sure. And a big part of it's coaching. Programs that have good coaches end up with better players because they keep those kids a little bit accountable, right? They grab the right moment and they tell them at the right moment, right, where it can sink in a little bit. And that's when we're on the bench in a game a lot of times where you saw it happen, right? You can go talk to them directly where they actually still remember what you're talking about. And then they're like, oh, that's what you're talking about in practice when you talk about him, that guy, right? That's where I think we can have a huge effect on our players. So.
Well, in a lot of the games, for us, in this room, our seasons are a lot shorter than the AAA or the midget model nationally. So our games, like what you said, you're trying to play as a team, and when a game's what most of their 10, 11 months out of the year is showcase hockey. So we have to remind our guys, you know, we are up by 1 with 5 minutes left. You know, or conversely, we're down by 1 with 5 minutes left. There's a context to the game.
Yeah.
Too, and you saw it last night, a couple of games you guys played in, Providence came pretty hard at the end.
Right.
And then obviously Mankato just stayed above the pot, but it's the context the game delivers it to, and a lot of this stuff during showcase hockey, the kids don't get that comment.
Yeah.
It's 100%.
There's some great AAA stuff going on. Where
So
kids
they don't
are
really
learning a ton.
understand.
There's some that aren't as good,
The
right?
game dictates
it's
when
the
you
Wild
should,
West
should
with that
go.
stuff.
Yeah, right. So.
That's where I think that's why it's so important. I think with this group, because you do have your guys back in the winter, and you have a long enough period of time that you can probably have an effect on them. And it's important to those players to be on those teams, right? All the guys that are playing high school, it's important to be on your high school team. It's important to be on your Bantam team. And I feel like there's an importance of that. Just going through the tryouts with the Bantams, just seeing how important it is to those kids that do and don't make it. Like it's so important to them. They care. We just gotta sometimes just have a hard conversation too, right? Sometimes it's just easy to let them get away with it, especially when you're your best player. But if you want them to get better, let's have that conversation once in a while. And again, you always got to throw them right back out there, but have the conversation. Yeah.
I think creating a pass first player, the big challenges come from the habits created when they're young. And so when you're a squirt or you're a peewee, the size of players, they're playing on the same sheet of ice as the players in the National Hockey League are playing on. It's very easy for them to skate in and help win the game. So these habits get created. And then it comes on us as high school coaches, and if you're fortunate to have a really good band coach, teach them the application of that.
Yeah.
When to and not to.
Right, and that's a big reason why they're trying to get the small rinks for those guys, right? So they have to kind of play in tight spaces, because that's really the game. The guys that can play in tight spaces are the ones that they get all the points, basically. Because they can just think a little bit quicker. That's really what it is, it's built the decisions, right? The guy that can make the most fast decisions is going to make the best plays. And then their skills is to carry it out. That's all I got. I'm done.
One question, when you guys are talking about power play stuff, and you're talking with the defense, do you tell them shoot low for tips, or is it all situation based?
Well, it's a big part. Yeah, everything's situation based because that's hockey, right? Like there's not one situation. Like if my D's up on the top of the circles by that time, I'm like, now you're shooting a score probably. If it's not that shot, you're probably shooting so someone can get a tip or rebound, or for someone else. Basically, you're more shooting for us to score. That's what I would say.
Well, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it. Good luck tonight.
Thanks.
We'll take a quick break, stretch, use the restroom, and we'll come back.